Do you know how many subcultures were there? Let me tell you. There were so many subcultures. Yuppies, punk, grunge, emo, rasta, bikers, skinhead, straight edge, mod, rock and roll, teddy boys, hippie. And how designers took inspiration from these subcultures to make their fashion collections. Let's go deep into it. Yuppies is the short term for young urban professionals or young upwardly mobile urban professionals. As some authors contend, the term yuppies refers to people who are generally between the ages of their late 20s to mid 20s, usually employed in a professional job, often living in an urban setting. Yuppies tend to earn in the upper middle class income range at an early age. Yuppies tend to be conservative and focus on making money to fuel a lifestyle that is filled with expensive toys such as cars, kitchen gadgetry, hobby equipment, the latest electronic anything, and other luxury items. Yuppie, depending upon who uses the term, is viewed as either a positive or a negative term. People who equate it with the demographics and the lifestyle tend to be comfortable with the term. Yuppies are not that happy with other meanings the term. Yuppie has come to represent people who purchase items just because they are expensive, people who pay less attention to family life and place more emphasis on showing off new toys, while entertaining friends and working more to the neglect of other priorities to make even more money. Yuppie's Young Urban Professionals. Yuppie was an acronym for Young Upwardly Mobile Professional Person. The word was coined by the advertising industry to capture the essence of a particular type of work hard, play hard, ambitious minded city career person of either sex. The hectic lifestyle of a yuppie meant that after long hours of work, rare free time was spent in a self indulgent way, frittering away the cash earned on anything from expensive makeup and perfume to a bottle of fine champagne. Conspicuous wastage part of the attitude. Fashion of the 1980s were vastly different from the hippie chic and rebellious punk styles of the 70s. The 80s reflected a more money obsessed and image conscious era with expensive and flamboyant fashions. It became chic to show off one's wealth by wearing high cost designer clothes and accessories. Especially popular were fashions with designer logos. Louis Vuitton's monogram pattern on their luggage and bags, Moschino's gold belt buckles and buttons, Chanel's interlocking C's on quilted bags, Versace's Medusa logo on jeans and t-shirts, etc. The main symbol of the 80s were the yuppies, young urban professionals, young adults with high successful careers, earning huge salaries, preferring to be single and childless. Mostly working either as stockbrokers, lawyers, or media careers. The motto of the yuppies was work hard and play hard, meaning that money was spent as quickly as it was earned. And the 80s were also known as gimme decade. Yuppies, both male and female, dressed to conform to the power suit look. Highly tailored, big shouldered suit for women, this look combined with either a short, tight skirt or pants acted as a protective shield and as a statement of authority in mainly male dominated occupations. The power dressing look was especially favored by the Americans and Italians. The American soap operas such as Dallas and Dynasty also made the wide shoulder, heavily made up, and dominant female image widely copied. Evening wear was also turned aggressive while highly emphasized shoulders and dresses that had balloon skirts, puff sleeves, and shiny fabrics in brash colors. Christian Lacroix was the most famous evening wear designer of the 80s and widely regarded as the savior of haute couture of that time. Although partying and working were the main preoccupations of the 80s, there was also a continued growth of the fitness craze. Bodybuilding and aerobics were almost a necessity for most yuppies. This aerobics craze was led to the popularity of lycra fabric, and this had a major effect on fashion designers like Alaya used the stretchable fabric to cut his clingy and sexy dresses. Important pop icons include the Material Girl Madonna, the King of the Pop Michael Jackson, gender bender performer Boy George, pop sensation Prince, black rapper Styles Run DMC. Apart from the expensive branded labels, luxuriously decadent couture and powerful suit look of the 80s, other important developments of the period include the avant-garde Japanese designers, the new romantics from London, as well as the growth of the American and Italian fashion industries. However, by the mid 80s, the excessive partying mood of the decade began to wear off as more people started to become aware of international problems such as the AIDS epidemic, the Chernobyl nuclear accident, and the depleting ozone layer. Celebrities also became more aware of these problems and used their fame to support various causes. The supermodels protesting against the fur trade and refusing to wear fur on the catwalks, as well as the international pop stars performing in Live Aid, the largest rock concert to raise money for the staffing in Ethiopia. World economics were devastated by the stock market crash on Black Monday, 19 October 1987, and this caused a financial downturn in the fashion trade, a demise of the yuppie cult, and end to opulent designer fashion. This also brought about significant stylistic changes in fashion of the 90s. To fully understand the punk movement, one needs to understand the background of the movement. Past events shape the culture and philosophy of any movement. Punk has its earliest roots in the United States, in New York City. It was there in the very late 1960s and early 1970s that bands such as Ramones, Television Patti Smith, and Blondie emerged on the New York punk scene. It is important to keep in mind that it was a scene and not the movement that occurred in Great Britain in the later parts of the 70s. The scene in the US remained small until the punk movement in Britain was given considerable media attention. Because punk is the counterculture, it cannot be pinpointed exactly when the movement began. However, most would agree that it was sometime in 1975. Britain was suffering from the recession at that time. In the times of extreme hardship, people look for an outlet for their anger. This is exactly what happened in Great Britain. Adolescents became angry and showed their frustration and dissatisfaction of situations or conditions in 1975. The poor working class youths of Britain began to use the style of the New York punk scene. Adolescents were angry because they seemed doomed to living out an existence on the dole. This, coupled with normal adolescent feelings of isolation and rift, gave rise to the punk movement. Punk music became a strong way in which punks could give vent to their feelings and identify themselves as a counterculture. Their dress also became a means of identification. Punk as a subculture was beginning to take shape. Conformity was what punk stood against. Even it has been stated that true punk is not a look or a fad, yet the look of punk is important because it is visible expression of the anti-conformity philosophy. The dress of a punk reflects the attitude: jeans, Doc Martens, red laces, studded jackets, army pants, safety pins are all a visible expression of the punk's desire to be non-conformist. Though it seems that punk had little or no fashion sense, they were in a sense too anti-fashion that they made an even bigger statement. One of the main shops that sophisticized in punk fashion was Malcolm McLaren's shop sexes. Sex specialized in leather and bondage clothing and pre-mutilated or modified clothing that not all punks could afford. Those that could eat it up though. The punks were fond of leather jackets, torn and ripped clothes, clothing that in no way matched, or accessories such as safety pins, swastikas, and communist symbols. On the whole, punk fashion emphasized individualism and embraced anything that stood out from the norm. Punk music can probably be considered as the way in which punks most strongly define themselves. Punk music is mainly the staple food for almost all punks. Punk music is an outlet for punks to express their rage, anger, etc. In the past, punk rock made social statements mostly with regard to the authority of the establishment. Bands such as the Sex Pistols, Clash, Damned, etc. came to the fore and used their music to express their frustrations. The lyrics in punk music frequently contain oppositional themes: anti-romantic love songs, anti-parents, anti-peers groups. Heroes of the subculture are generally the respective band members. This is an area of great concern as many of the band members have died through suicide or drug overdoses. A few examples are Sid Vicious, bassist for Sex Pistols, died at age 21 from a heroin overdose. Stephanie Sargent, guitarist for the group 7 Year Bitch, died at the age of 24 from a heroin overdose. Kurt Cobain, singer and guitarist for Nirvana, died at the age of 27 from suicide. Jason Thirst, bassist for the group Pennywise, died at the age of 27 from suicide. These are just a few of some examples of drink, drug, and suicide related deaths. In popular culture is typically referred to as the decade of anti-fashion. In reality, anti-fashion was only one of the many trends in fashion in the 1990s. The fashion of the 1990s was also characterized by many overlapping, often contradictory trends. The most significant event in 1990s fashion was the rise of grunge fashion in 1992. The grunge style, which was influenced by grunge music, which achieved mainstream popularity in 1992. Grunge fashion consisted mostly of the plaid, flannel shirts, stone-washed blue jeans, and dark colors. Grunge fashion popularized Doc Martens style shoes and boots, and high-top sneakers in red, indigo, forest green, and black. Grunge fashion emphasized long, straight hair. Grunge fashion has a unisex phenomenon. Although the grunge look was considered anti-fashion, the fashion industry turned the grunge look into a distinct fashion style. The fashion industry began selling such items as plaid hooded sweatshirts, sweatshirts, vests, plaid long sleeve t-shirts, and plaid shorts. Grunge fans in the Pacific Northwest believed that the media gave excessive importance to the clothing worn by grunge musicians and fans, along with other aspects of the local culture. Clothing commonly worn by grunge fans in the Northwest in its early years was a blend of the punk aesthetic with the typical outdoorsy clothing, most notably flannel shirts of the region. The fashion did not evolve out of the conscious attempt to create an appealing fashion, but due to the inexpensiveness of such clothes and the warmth that they provided for the cold climate of the region, the media, rather than focusing on the music, would give this fashion a heavy amount of exposure. In the early 1990s, the fashion industry marketed grunge fashion to a widespread audience, charging relatively high pricing for clothing that they assumed to be popular in the grunge scene. Similarly, the media would knew grunge was a whole culture. In England, youth who dressed in this fashion were sometimes called grungers. The grunge look coincided with the revival of the hippie fashion. Hippie fashion, in fact, began to re-enter the fashion world in 1990. With the return of tie-dye shirts, most fashion critics thought the grunge of new hippie times went well together. It is most widely believed that international grunge culture success came with the smash success of Nirvana Smells Like Teen Spirit. The music video also captured Pearl Jam, another grunge band from the Seattle area, to success with their debut album 10. Throughout 1991-94, grunge and the alternative culture replaced hair metal and other popular 80s bands in the mainstream. While the mainstream success affected many American grungies who were fans of the underground success. The ideals of the grunge among teenagers, including the anti-corporate attitude, continued. Smells Like Teen Spirit was a song that brought Nirvana and grunge music to the attention of the teenagers around the world. Pearl Jam was one of the most popular bands of the grunge music era in the early 1990s. Grunge is believed to have originated in Seattle and the Pacific Northwest youth culture. After the emergence of grunge music in the mid-1980s with underground labels such as Sub Pop, Kill Rockstar, and various other record labels in Washington state, with the emergence of this new genre, which rejected mainstream success of the mainstream rock such as hair bands and heavy metal that were popular in the 1980s. Many fans of this genre became closely tied with the bands of this genre, who sported flannel shirts commonly worn by loggers in the region. Torn jeans were also popular among fans as it was a more rejection of the mainstream culture. Other examples of the common clothes worn by fans of grunge were Doc Marten boots and other clothes where the punk anti-establishment attitude were combined with outdoorsy clothing. Currently, stores still sell plaid work shirts and jeans, meant to be piled on frantically in the manner of Kurt Cobain, the iconic lead singer and guitarist of Nirvana. But new interpretation of the style has surfaced in more profound quarters as well. If Cobain thought nothing of pulling a tattered baby doll dress over jeans, combining a Pantone shirt and a knit, or wrapping said shirt at his hips like a skirt, designers are taking a tighter route. Marc Jacobs, who notoriously created a grunge collection for Perry Ellis a decade ago, reintroduced elements of the look in his secondary line. The collection was built on an amalgam of rainbow-colored layers, a sprightly version of the style that was once embraced by disaffected high schoolers of the protagonists of Vine's world. fashion has changed with time. Early trends included haircuts similar to those worn by the Romulans and Vulcans in Star Trek. Tightly fitting sweaters, button down shirts, and work jackets, often called gas station jackets. Emo dress is characterized as distinctly non fashionable, keeping with the movement's theme of showing little to no interest in all aspects of society. Emo individuals perceive themselves to be outcast and dress accordingly so as to avoid any appearance of attempting conformity or falling short. Girls tend to have short, dyed black hair with the bangs cut straight across, usually done by individual herself or by a friend, shunning the processed rubber stamped appearance of the mainstream hairstyles. Jewelry, including facial and other body piecings, is quietly common and is kept as natural as is possible. Wooden and handbag accessories are extremely popular and are again often homemade. Clothes follow suit, ranging from thrift store finds to sewn skirts and shirts, often composed of multiple fabrics combined into one articles of clothing. Vintage articles are trendy for members of emo subculture, including 1970s style shoes and jackets. Emo boys often sport shaggy locks, although for males, less emphasis is placed on dyeing the hair black. Men tend to wear too small t-shirts and baggy pants, often with a studded black belt. The same preference for thrift good applies, and jewelry still tends to be all natural and as tight as it possible. Girls and boys alike wear thick or horn rimmed glasses and often carry backpacks of messenger bags littered with pins from assorted emo bands or bearing anti-established pro-underground slogans. Emo dress tends to follow lines of non-conformity almost without exception, but individual styles may vary as long as they continue to emphasize second-hand goods or a general expression of indifference toward current fashion trends. Emotional music evolved out of the punk movement spreading throughout the United States in the 1980s. The same Shun Authority approach applies to both emo and traditional punk music, and both share the high energy level characteristic of punk and post-punk material. Emo differs from traditional punk in that an extreme emphasis is placed on raw emotion, which is conveyed through heartbroken and sometimes angry lyrics, as in Screaming, and in through emotionally charged chord progressions and high energy beats. The music is designed to be highly dramatic, taking the listener to the series of powerful ups and downs with constant lyrical reminders of the heartbreak and pain the music is meant to reflect. Harmony is used more so in emo than in punk music, particularly to accent certain words and concepts. And emo music on the whole tends to emphasize melody and lyricism, certainly more so than does traditional punk music, which is designed to anger and move to action rather than depress or emphasize vulnerability. Perhaps the most distinct difference between emo and traditional punk music is the former repeated use of loud, soft contrast reflective of the singer's mood changes between heartbreak, anger, and confusion. Before emo, almost all punk music held as a steady volume perpetuated by rhythm guitar. Emo often cuts the rhythm guitar suddenly, opting for a more intimate organ, bells, or other softer, more contemplation provoking type of sound. The biggest names of the period are Fire Party, Rites of Spring, One Last Wish, Embrace, Beefeater, Grey Matter, and Moss Icon. The first wave of emo began to fade after the breakups of most of the involved bands in the early 1990s. In the mid 90s, emo began to reflect the indie scene that followed the influences of the Fugazi. Bands like Texas as the Reason and Sunny Day Real Estate introduced a more indie rock style of emo. less violent than its predecessor. Indie emo survived until the late 90s. As the remaining indie emo bands entered the mainstream, newer bands began to emulate the more mainstream style, creating a style of music that has now earned the moniker emo within popular culture. Whereas even in the past, the term emo was used to identify a wide variety of bands, the breadth of bands listed under today's emo is even more vast, leaving the term emo as more of a loose identifier than as a specific genre of music. Rastafari is a religious movement that appeared in Jamaica after its discovery by Cristoforo Colombo. After that discovery, the population of Jamaica was turned to slaves, and it was a very small part of Jamaicans who managed to escape it. Those who escaped found shelter in Ethiopia, the kingdom of Rastafari Makonnen. Rastafari is an Afro-American Christianity. Rastafarians propagate love to everyone, especially to Hamites. Rejection of hate, anger, envy, violence, lie, and betrayal. Rastafarians will help anyone, anywhere, anyhow, as they respect all the people in the world. They have restrictions for pork, grilled fish, vinegar, salt, wine, gaming, and changing of appearance. The real Rastafarian is not allowed to perform any changes to his appearance like haircut, shaving, or tattoo. Rastafarian's world view is a mix of Bible, Ethiopian legends, and African stories. According to the Bible, Yahweh is his godfather. Rastafarians call him Jah. Jah is a great cosmic power expressed in one word. These beliefs of Rastafarians were reflected in their music, the reggae music. The characteristic feature of reggae music is religious texts that are dedicated to Jah. That's why concerts of reggae bands remind the choir. The most famous reggae singer is Bob Marley. He is considered to be the father of reggae music. Bob Marley was a member of 12 Knees community, the Rastafarians community. In these songs, Bob Marley proclaimed Rastafarian religion and culture. He has 5 sons who also follow Rastafari and are reggae singers. Ganja for Rastafarian is just like meditation for yogis. It is means of nirvana reaching the paradise they want to get to. So Rastafarians are people who propagate love, assistance, peace, brotherhood of all the people. Listen to reggae and use ganja strictly as a means of reaching nirvana and harmony of body and soul of human and nature. Today, Rastas are not just Black African but also include other diverse ethnic groups including Native American, White, Maori, and Indonesian. Additionally, in the 1990s, the word Rastaman became part of the vocabulary of the post-Soviet states. After the fall of the USSR, a youth subculture of cannabis users formed primarily in Russia and Ukraine, many of whom began to call themselves Rastamani. They adopted a number of symbols of Rastafari culture, including reggae music, especially honoring Bob Marley. The green, yellow, red colors, and sometimes dreadlocks, but not Afrocentrism. Most are ethnically Slavic. Many of them protest against what they call Babylon. A Russian reggae scene has developed that is only partially similar to common reggae. Rastamani have their own folklore, publish literature and records, as well as creates websites and form online communities. St. Agnes Place is a Rastafari place of worship in London. Anguilla, Antigua and Barbuda, Bahamas, Barbados, Bermuda, Caymans, Grenada, Jamaica, Montserrat, Saint Kitts and Nevis, Saint Vincent and the Grenadines, Trinidad and Tobago, Turks and Caicos, Virgin Islands, sound samples, other Caribbean music, Aruba and the Gentiles, Cuba, Dominica, Dominican Republic, Haiti, Hawaii, Martinique and Guadeloupe, Puerto Rico. Music has long played an integral role in Rastafari, and the connection between the movement and various kinds of music has become well known. Due to the international fame of reggae musicians like Bob Marley and Peter Tosh, Nyabingi music is the most integral form of Rastafarian music. It is played at worship ceremonies called ground nations that include drumming, chanting, and dancing, along with prayer and ritual smoking of ganja. Harley Davidson enthusiasts are one of the most distinct subcultures in America. To outsiders, they are rough looking individuals who are fiercely patriotic and proud Americans. Their motto is live to ride, ride to live, and they love nothing more than to jump on their hog and cruise freely along the nation's highways. They ride with friends or join clubs such as the Hells Angels. They gather in large numbers on multiple occasions a year at places like Daytona, Florida, or Sturgis, South Dakota to celebrate their freedom and love for their lifestyle. Bikers assemble at places like the Harley Davidson dealership in Santa Maria and in the bars of Pismo Beach. It is important among the group members to display toughness in their personal posture, yet maintain an easygoing attitude. Typical attire consists of leather jackets and chaps, denim jeans and Harley Davidson t-shirts with a bandana or baseball cap. Bikers mingle and converse with each other but do not get too personal. Primary topics of conversation are normally centered on motorcycles. Bikers usually have at least two tattoos, and one of them is typically an eagle with Harley Davidson tattooed underneath. The main gathering places for bikers are bars and Harley shops. They also gather annually at large rallies around the country, that is Sturgis and Daytona. Most bikers maintain a noticeable amount of American pride and go to great lengths to pronounce their patriotism. Bikers are classified into different groups such as outlaw types and weekend warriors. The outlaw types are not generally outlaw, but simply people who live to ride and their lives defined by their love for the open road. These people are usually of lower income status and their bikes tend to have more of a custom, almost chopper type look to them. The weekend warriors, however, are usually middle to upper class income people who ride Harleys as more of a hobby than a way of life. Their bikers are usually a little more stock and have less features. The weekend warriors dress and look like the outlaws but do not put up as rough as an exterior. At the heart of the subculture are the bikes. They range in style from small sportsters to huge fat boys to rigged out choppers. Sportsters are small bikes which are mainly ridden by women or novice riders due to their lightweight and thus easy maneuverability. Fat boys or other large bikes have a wider body and are lower to the ground than the sportsters and are usually ridden by weekend warriors. Choppers are bikes that are almost completely custom made. They have a rigged out look, meaning that the front wheel is more forward than the average bike. Choppers are ridden by outlaw types who put all of their money into their bikes, or rich weekend warriors who can afford the $30,000 price tag for most choppers. Most bikers have a tendency to consume large quantities of bike and listen to classic rock. The average biker is a male, around 45 years old and slightly overweight. Bikers usually like to let their hair turn gray naturally and they prefer to braid it into a Willie Nelson style ponytail. Most bikers are married. The outlaws tend to have their wives with them who ride along on the back of the motorcycle. The weekend warriors' wives are not as highly represented and Harley functions, but many to attend. The biggest asset a biker can have to increase this image is a nice bike. Harley Davidson are normally bought stock, meaning they only have assembly into line produced bikes. To have a great looking bike, a biker must customize. Customizing a long and expensive process where a biker adds little details such as hand grips and different handle bars to his her bike. And the most common fact among bikers is the more chrome and the better. Customizing is a long and expensive process where a biker adds little details such as hands, grips, and different handbars to his her bike. And the most common fact among bikers is the more chrome, the better. The amount of customization in a bike displays a person's dedication and love for his or her bike. Other important custom items include louder exhaust pipes, sleeker, more comfortable seats, chrome wheels, saddlebags, and a flame job. Flames painted on the gas tank of the bike. Bikers have a fierce loyalty to their friends and their bikes, but they can get annoyed with strangers, to include fellow bikers. They are veterans and have a deep affection for the military and are conservative in their views and support many right-wing policies. The development of bikers movement was caused by movies about bikers. Those movies made biker subculture widely known. The most popular are the Wild One, Mad Max, Easy Rider, and the latest one, Wild Horse. Skinhead is a member of subculture that originated among working class youths in the United Kingdom, the 1960s, and then spread to other parts of the world. Named for their close cropped or shaven heads. First skinheads were greatly influenced by West Indian, especially Jamaican boys and British mods in terms of fashion, music, and lifestyle. The skinhead subculture originated in the mid to late 60s and was created by the working class community that had a strong fondness for fashion and music. The original skinheads enjoyed listening to souls, SK, Blue Beach, and rock steady music. They were also high influenced by the Jamaican Rouge boy subculture, reggae, and Rastafarianism. Originally, the skinhead subculture was primarily based on those elements, not politics or race. Since then, however, attitudes toward race and politics have become factors in which some skinheads align themselves. Fashion-wise, skinheads array from a clean-cut 1960s mod influenced style to less strict punk and hardcore influenced styles. 60s soul, SK, rocksteady, early reggae, then punk rock in the late 1970s, such as The Clash, Sham 69, and Menace. Two-tone, more commonly known as two-tone, such as the Specials Madness and the selectors to name, but a few became the most popular music style. Here originally between a 2 and 3 grade clip guard, short but not bald, beginning in the late 1970s, typically shaved closer with no greater than a number 2 guard. Now some skinheads clip their hair with no guard and some even shave it with a razor. This started with the introduction of the oil scene. Coats. MA1 type flight jackets, popular brands Warrior and Alpha, usually black or green. Harrington jackets, monkey jackets, crumble style overcoats, sheepskin, 3x4 length coats, donkey jackets, parkas. Levi's, Lee or Wrangler jeans, usually blue, straight leg with rolled cuffs, turn-ups to show off boots, often with hem cut off and sewn to give neater, flatter turn-up, star-pressed, flat, fronted slacks and other trousers. Bleachers, jeans splattered with bleach to resemble camouflage trousers. Popular among punk-influenced oilskins, combat trousers, plain or camouflage, popular among oilskins and scooter boys. Women usually same jeans and trousers as men, or skirts and stockings. Some skin girls wear fishnet stockings and mini skirts, a style introduced during the skinhead revival. Men boots, originally army surplus or generic work boots, which is what Mr. Martens were, especially surplus British army boots, then commercialized Dr. Martens, Aka dogs, TMs or Doc Martens, boots and shoes. Other brands of boots have become popular, partly because Dr. Martens and Grinders footwear are no longer made in England. For women, Dr. Martens boots or shoes, monkey boots, loafers or bloggers. Twibbly hats, pork pie hats, flat caps, aka scaly cap, benny or driver cap. Less common have been bowler hats, aka derby hats, mostly among stud heads, and they're influenced by the film A Clockwork Orange 1971. Braces. Various colors, usually no more than half-inch in width. In some areas, wider braces were identified as skinhead as either white power or a wannabe. The straight edge subculture stands up against vices of modern society. Its members abstain from alcohol, tobacco, and drugs or reduce their use significantly. Some may also abstain from caffeine, follow a vegetarian or vegan diet, and refrain from casual sex. There are many reasons which lead to this lifestyle: philosophical, religious, social, or just considering healthy motives. Straight edge followers believe in different religions, Christianity, agnosticism, etc. Some are even atheists, so there is a huge variety of straight edge beliefs. Music is a very important aspect of straight edge subculture as it forms its ideology through messages in lyrics. Some of the more popular straight edge bands are 7 Seconds, SSD, Youth of Today, Good Clean Fun, Casey Jones, Throwdown. They play hardcore punk rock but have gone through stages of severe isolation to good collaboration with punk musicians. The most prevalent symbol of straight edge is the letter X, which is worn as a tattoo or part of the clothes, or which can be part of some accessories. According to some sources of the straight edge X can be traced to the Teen Idols tour in San Francisco. They were going to play in one nightclub, but the same evening, the manager of the place understood that the members of the band are under the legal drinking age, so they cannot enter the club. The management made a compromise. They were let in after each of them as marked with the black X on the hand, so the staff would know not to serve them alcohol. Gradually, this has become a symbol of the new subculture. It appears in 1981 in the song Straight Edge of the hardcore band Minor Threat. The chorus says, I have got the straight edge and the fosters abstention of drugs. They give the first wave of forming of the straight edge subculture and maybe called its fathers. Straight edge has gone through three different stages. In first period, the community was very close to punks. This is in the beginning of the 80s when the two subcultures are united by their individualism, pursuit of freedom and living for the moment. This is the time of the bands Minor Threat, 7 Seconds, SSD, Uniform Choice, and Cause for Alarm. They play with their other punk artists, but in the mid 80s, the two communities drift apart. The boys from Youth of Today came into the public's eye and called for healthy life, vegetarianism, and identified with animal rights issues. This even more splits the two movements. In the early 90s, musicians became more active, aggressive, and even violent. They believed that violence was a necessary method to promote ideology of straight edge and clean living. Bands of this period include Earth Crisis, Gorilla Biscuits, Judge, and Bolt. They became less tolerant of non-straight edge people. After 2000 came a hark back in the history of straight edge. The followers start to play again and associate with punk musicians. This new bond may lead to big changes, but only time will tell. The new names that appear on stage are Good Clean Fun, Champion, Cassie Jones, Trial, Down to Nothing, Throwdown, etc. The members of straight edge subculture can be called the good punks because they live a healthy life. They introduce a new idea which is very hard to be criticized. It's kind of untraditional for young people to take such drastic measures about their way of living, but we see again the aspiration for being different from others, even if it costs you a personal sacrifice. The mod subculture began with a few clique of teenage boys with family connections to the garment trade in London in 1958. These early mods were generally middle class and were obsessed with new fashions and music styles, such as slim cut Italian suits, modern jazz, and rhythm and blues. Their all night urban social life was fueled in part by amphetamines. Mods gathered their all night clubs such as the Scene and the Flamingo in London and Twisted Wheel Club in Manchester to show off their clothes and dance moves. They typically use scooters for transformation, usually either Vespa or Lambretta. One reason for this is that public transit stopped relatively early and scooters were cheaper than cars. After a law was passed requiring at least one mirror be attached to every motorbike, many mods added 4, 10, or even as many as 30 mirrors to their scooters as a mockery of the new law. This can be seen in the cover for the Who's album Quadrophenia, which depicts the main character Jimmy on his scooter looking into his 4 rear view mirrors. Mod, a word that evokes geometric block prints, ultra mini skirts, and pop art. Mod fashion was born in 1960s London and has gone through several rebirths in the intervening 4.5 decades, though less block print and more girlish silhouette. Everywhere you look today, you can see bursts of 1960s mod era inspired blouses, dresses, mini skirts, handbags, and jewelry. Mod fashion short for modern and was the child of the 60s, which came from the streets and defined revolution and change. Fashion lived up to the extreme changes taking place among the baby boomers who were growing up from the pale colored poofy caudal skirts of the 50s and ready for something that defined them and the realities they were forced to confront. Mod fashion was reflected with deep, vibrant colors, often displayed in geometric and artsy patterns. Mod also modernist hairstyles are looked for in the urban. Typical mod hairstyles are blunt and angular, with a clean aesthetic. Mod fashion places much emphasis on sexy, streamlined design, and mod hairstyles are no different. Its little wonder fashion designers are enamored to the mod look, which puts boys and girls in sharp cut suits and minis, in the delectably restrained combination of black and white. The new movie Factory Girl, which stars Sienna Miller as the tragic 1960s pop icon Ajit Sedgwick, who hung out with the misfits and psychedelic groovers at Andy Warhol's factory in New York, won't be released in Australia for some time, but people in the fashion knew already are talking breathlessly of a mod revival. Rock and roll, also called rock, is a form of popular music, usually featuring vocals, often with vocal harmony backing, electric guitars, and saxophone in the early days, and a strong backbeat. Rock and roll emerged as a defined musical style in America in the 1950s. Though elements of rock and roll can be seen in rhythm and blues records as far back as the 1920s. Early rock and roll combined elements of blues, boogie woogie, jazz and rhythm, and blues, and is also influenced by traditional folk music, gospel music, black and white, and country and western. Rock music and fashion have also been linked. The tough, leather-clad image of early rockers such as Wayne Cochran in the US with the Rolling Stones. In the UK, influenced a generation of young people on both sides of the ocean. A cultural war broke out in the late 1960s in the UK over the rivalry between the modes, who favored high fashion, expensive styles, and the rockers who wore t-shirts and leather. Followers of each style had their favored musical acts, who eagerly fed into the conflict of releasing records, praising one style and disparaging another. The mods versus rockers controversy would form the backdrop for the Who's Rock opera Quadrophenia. Rock musicians were early adopters of hippie fashion and introduced such styles as a narrow jacket. Bands such as the Beatles had custom-made clothing that influenced much of the 60s style. As rock music genres became more segmented within artists who became and as important as the music itself in defining the intent and relationship to the audience. In the late 1970s, disco acts helped bring flashy urban styles to the mainstream, while new wave groups began wearing more conservative attire, including suit jackets and skinny ties, in an attempt to be as unlike mainstream. Rockers who still favored blue jeans and hippie influenced clothes as possible. From its early 1950s commencement through the early 1960s, rock and roll music spawned new dance crazes. Teenagers found the irregular rhythm of the backbeat is especially suited to reviving the jitterbug dancing of the big band era. Sock hops, gym dances, and home basement dance parties became the rage, and American teens watched Dick Clark American Bandstand to keep up on the latest dance and fashion styles. From the mid 1960s on, as rock and roll yielded gradually to rock, later dance genres followed, starting with the twist and leading up to the funk, disco, house, and techno. A teen idol has a recording artist who attracted a very large following of mostly female teenagers because of their good looks and sex appeal, as much as their musical qualities. A good example is Frank Sinatra in the 1940s, although a case can be made for Rudy Valley even earlier. With the birth of rock and roll, Elvis Presley became one of the greatest teen idols of all time. Teen idols of the rock and roll years were followed by many other artists with massive appeal to a teenage audience, including the Beatles and the Monkees. Teen idols were not only known for their catchy pop music, but good looks also played a large part in their successes. It was because of this that certain fan magazines geared to the fans of teen idols. 16 magazine, Tiger Beat were created. The Teddy Boys, or Teds as they were called, were born in the 1950s when rock and roll was first introduced and the teenager was officially born. Rebellion and looking cool was all a major part of the Teddy Boy trend. The name came from a shortened version of Edwardian. Because of the Teddy Boy fashions first began with everyone wearing Edwardian period style suits and his look was important, along with plenty of breezes in the hair. Slick back with a big quiff or kiss curl in the middle of the forehead. The Teds hung out in the gangs and dated teddy girls and often rioted amongst the rockers who wore leather jackets and often rode on motorbikes. The famous Notting Hill riots of 1958 was created by gangs of teddy boys causing fights and racial abuse against the black community around the area. The Teds eventually evolved into rockabillys or psychobilly, which is still very much around. Traditionally, teddy boys or neo-Edwardians sported the drape, a long knee-length, single-breasted wool jacket with narrow contrasting lapels and cuffs either of velvet or satin, and plenty of pockets. They will contrast or matching narrow drainpipe trousers, brocade waistcoats, stiff shirts and shoestring ties, or bootlace slim jim ties topped off with suede shoes. Teds also wore crepe soled shoes which helped with the dance movements of jiving. Teddy boy clothes were not cheap to buy and when custom tailored usually cost up to £100 for one outfit. The boys slicked back their hair with brilliantine into a wavy quiff style with long sideburns and because of the way the hair was finished to the back of the head. The style was brushed back to meet in the middle with the finishing touch of a comb run down the center back, thus giving the look of a DA duck's ass. The most common haircut was called a Tony Curtis, taken from the way he wore his hair. Lots of teddy boys had bikes in the 50s. The rocker style was born from the Teds who wore drapes at weekends but leathers on the bike. By the early 60s, rockers were a major style. A trip to the Ace Cafe in London is well worth a visit to learn about rockers. The fashion for teddy boy clothes spread across the world, even to the USSR. In the USA, teen fashion fads were paralleled by youths who wore leather jackets instead of a drape, sometimes leather trousers but often jeans, all accessorized with a shiny motorbike. The film West Side Story captures this era perfectly as does the later retrospective film Grease. The ponytail girlfriends of the Teds wore high makeup and took every fashion to excess. Their favorite outfit was a close-fitted black sweater and calf-length skirt or toreador pants or circle skirts with low-cut tops, all perfect to display the body when dancing. By 1950s, The teddy boy movement was on the wane in the UK, and by 1958 was fading rapidly as teenagers fixed on new fashions influenced by American pop and cinema culture and a nod to the Italians. The creatively coined term hippie comes from the word hip and is jazz slang for the word hipster, which was coined during the 1940s. As years passed, hippie was used to refer to many different people or groups of people. However, the term had a long history and was only accepted as a common and usual word in 1967. No matter who it refers to, however, the term hippie remains true to its original meaning. It refers to a person or a group who belongs to a certain social environment that sprang in the United States during the 1960s. As the term continued to increase its popularity, the number of people who fit the description also grew considerably larger. Along with other movements, the hippies of the past became a counterculture, an entirely complete lifestyle that ruled the lives of its members in every aspect. What the hippies lived for was to counter the dominant culture in the society with another culture that was somewhat more liberal. Their main purpose was to go against the realms of the society that is in place by rejecting it. Hippies were mostly on the opposing side of what had already been established. They opposed nearly everything that is accepted by society. Their oppositions were not negative. They were against nuclear weapons and wars. Their doctrine revolved around love, peace, and freedom of self expression. Hippies believed that there was more to life than what the norms state. This is why they opposed restrictions above all else, and in the spirit of opposition, they in turn promoted what the society was opposed to and what was dominant in the world. Examples of what they advocated were the liberal use of what they called psychedelic drugs and freedom of sexual expression as well. They also rallied for the environment, and most hippies were vegetarian. As an entire culture, they also had their own ways of expressing themselves through music and art. They maximized the use of these culture tools in expressing what they believed in. Since they also pro peace, they do not engage in violence in demonstrating their views. Instead, they use other ways to be radical and to make their mark and to be heard. Two of the well known forms of expressions that the hippies used are music and their clothing style. The hippie music, which revolved mostly around, was called psychedelic rock, was one of the most popular ways of how these hippie lured into their radical society. Their music also became popular. Their clothing styles and the way they carried themselves, however, were more radical than their music. The hippies kept their hair long, regardless of gender, in breaking societal norms. They also chose to forego some of what people usually regard as necessities. Some hippies go braless and some go barefoot. They like to use bright, bold colors to express freedom. They snowed their independence through the unhindered use of colors and unusual clothes. The hippies were the believers of the bell-bottom pants, long flowing skirts, and peasant blouses. Another clothing trend that claimed popularity not only during their time but up to the present as well are the tie-dye t-shirts they used. To avoid supporting the corporate society, hippies like designing and making their own clothes. The same is true with the tie-dye theme. To avoid supporting the corporate society, hippies like designing and making their own clothes. The same is true with the tie-dye theme. Tie-dyed shirts can easily be made at home and they always come out differently every time. The colors would mix differently and the patterns would be unique for each shirt. As the society embraced the other hippie trends such as bell-bottom pants, long skirts, and peasant blouses, the tie-dyed shirts still stand out as truly hippie. It is still up until now closely associated with being a hippie. Tie-dye shirts still remain a distinct symbol of being part of the hippie counterculture. However, no matter how commercialized the hippie fashion statement may get, in truth it is still closely linked with hippie values. Inspired by the 60s and the 70s fashions, boho style bohemian has returned and looks more chic than ever. Boho chic style keeps main hippie features ethnic influences. DIY looks tie-dye and patchwork. Raw fabrics and materials, canvas, straw, wood, mixing them with heirloom pieces like lace dresses, embroidered linen blouses, and crochet shawls. Vintage men's hats, shoes, and belts, but also with glam and modern accessories like the latest stitch bag for the ultimate pair of shoes, metallic sparkles, or fancy jewelry. Flower prints, flowing maxi dresses with billowing sleeves, wide leg pants, fabrics like lace, silk and chiffon, soft leather, and sewed macrame, detailing and fringes are the key features of the romantic look. Singer in the contemporary hippie movement in Russia in 1967, VW combi bus decorated with hand painting. Hippie truck interior. The peace symbol was developed in the UK as a logo for the campaign for nuclear disarmament and was embraced by US anti-war protesters in the 1960s. D&D, Donna Karan, Topshop, Unique, and Veronique brand Cubo. There is no doubt that these subcultures are widely different from what they originally were. But this is not a signal that they were dead. They have evolved and changed with the times and have evolved into everything that has great attraction for young teenagers. It has infused artists and designers from different countries and eras. In my opinion, this is the best subject in fashion because through research, I have learned a lot about their music and lifestyles of different subcultures, and they are very inspirational to create fashion collections.